talking about hard, it's like semantic HTML. I thought it was pretty easy. Like, I use a header and nav. I stopped using div, I use article and main, and like, done, right? Simple. How hard can it be? So Julia just told me she studied Japanese. Sounds much, much harder. But then she told me I was wrong. So apparently I need to learn something here. So Julia, please educate me and the rest of us.
Yes, I will. Thank you. So semantic HTML means it's semantic, right? Right? Okay, so quick show of hands, who thinks they are using semantic HTML correctly? No. Nice, nice. Thanks for being so honest. Well, most of the developers think it's so obvious, and that's why so many developers also say that HTML isn't even a programming language, and well, this might be true, but I would say it is only as easy until browser and accessibility bugs appear. So why do we use semantic HTML, or why does it even exist? Most of the HTML elements come with built-in functionality, like a button or a link. And many also come with built-in styling, like a list or the headings. And others come even with built-in performance, like images. But only if you give the browser the right elements to work with. So by using semantic HTML, we as developers can ensure 3 important things which should concern us: good code quality, good developer experience, and good user experience. I mean, hitting all 3 of them would be like a jackpot in Las Vegas, but way more likely. All right, let's zoom out for a bit and look at what's actually happening under the hood. Let's take a look at the rendering processes and see how everything we write, especially semantic HTML, influences what the browser builds behind the scenes. Because we should think of that every tag we write and every attribute we add to the element and every decision in the end we make ends up in the orchestrated pipeline. So how does it work? How does it go to the browser from the text we write in our index.html file and what we see in the output? It all starts with row HTML, and the browser reads the HTML and passes it into the DOM tree, and at the same time the browser also processes what we're writing in our CSS sheet, and this is the CSS object model describing how the elements should look like, the colors, fonts, layout behavior, and more. And this is where it gets interesting. The DOM and CSS object model are merged into to form the render tree. I'm sure some of you are way better in explaining the whole rendering process. I'm trying very hard here. But yeah, let's go further. So next, we have the render tree layered, and it calculates every position from the HTML elements, the sizes of each visible element, or the ones who are visibility hidden, but still take up some place on the screen, based on the layout rules from the CSS or the user style sheet, the user agent style sheet. And at the same time, it's painting the visual UI. It also transforms into the accessibility tree. So the accessibility tree is a mirror from the DOM tree, and this is not where the visual UI is happening, but where assistive technology users get their information from. And in the end, there are our users who get the information even with the visual design or the assistive technology, but it's just one big user group. No different people or anything, it's just our users. So the DOM tree, document object model, is a structured in-memory representation of our page we are creating. Let's take a look at the tree and what it is telling us. Just a quick refresher. So on the left, I wrote a simple link and a simple button element with the typical attributes, the href and the type. And how is the code rendered in the, or shown in the DOM tree? We have the element, the body element. It's the parent element for our new generated elements, the link and the button element, which are direct childs of the parent element body, but read out from top to bottom, so the link appears first, then the button. And not every element we write makes it into the DOM, like the meta text, so they still appear, but they are grayed out because they are not rendered in the visuals, and also elements we put on display none. How does it work with the accessibility tree? So, as I already mentioned, the accessibility tree is like a mirror of the DOM tree, but it only renders nodes which are really important for the users using assistive technology. So we do have the body element, and we get way more information in the accessibility tree than we do with the DOM, because users who looking at the screen do not need to know that we wrote an A tag to happen, that it makes it a link, or how the button is created. They can simply see it, and if it's styled correctly, they already know what a link is, or what a button looks like, or how they can interact with it, but not our screen reader users, for example. So screen reader is one assistive technology users using most often, and they need additional information. And this is where accessibility tree comes in handy, because it provides more information for the user than the DOM tree. So for us developers, it's only the A tag, and an assistive tech user will get the information that this element is now a link they are on, and it has a role of link. It has a name, which would be maybe link text or more descriptive text for sure, and that this element they're currently on is focusable. And the same goes for the button. Let's walk over a bit more detailed what I've just said from a developer's perspective, when we write code and how we all hopefully debug and look our output in the DOM, and additional things we should do when creating our elements. So first we write our code in some code editor. In this case, the A tag with its attributes, the href, and a button with its type of button. So these are the typical attributes we use when we're creating a link and a button element. And of course, we need some accessible names for them. For the link, link text, for the button, button text. So it's understandable also for assistive tech users, most likely screen reader users. So when debugging, when we just want to see how it is rendered in the DOM, then we can check how it appears, and we have our A tag showing in the DOM with the exact href and with its text link text, as well as the button with its type, and that the text of the button is button text. So this is what we assume it will appear in the DOM, and this is also what we get. Then when we change our view from the DOM tree to the accessibility tree, we see that more information appears. Instead of the A tag, it appears that the element is a link with a text, with its accessible text, and this is a focus-able element. And instead of saying that the href and its URL, we see the output stored in the URL, and it has also the static text inside, which is the same as the link text already. If this would be empty, then it would not have an accessible name. And the same goes for the button element, that it's a button with a text and that is focus-able. And we can get to the accessibility tree by hitting at the button opening the accessibility pane. And we also want to look at it, how it will visually render, and this is just a normal user agent style sheet I get when using, in my case, so the code is not to show the accessibility pane. I used Firefox because it's not available in Safari, but with all my examples, I use Safari. on my MacBook, and this is the typical output, so the default styling from Safari for the link and also for the button. It's visually clear what these two elements are, and it's also understandable when we only look at the accessibility tree and listen to it. Yeah, and besides the visuals, we also want to check how assistive tech users, in our case, the screen reader users, will perceive our professional code using semantic HTML.
Link text, button.
So we could hear that it is a link, the first element, and the other element is a button. So we can assume that the assistive tech user will understand what these two elements are. And this is pretty neat, right? Because this is already included when writing semantic HTML correctly. And I already mentioned it a few times when talking about assistive tech users. It can be screen reader users, but the important part is when these are the users we can mostly work with, because when it works for screen readers, it also works for other assistive technologies like the Braille keyboard or and also magnifiers, pointers, eye tracking, and such. And we will focus on the screen reader output for our examples. The good thing is, when talking about screen readers, is that we do not have to do all the testing with every screen reader out there and all the browsers we have, because this would be quite a lot. So there is this WebM screen reader user survey. They do it every year. And there you see that the most free used screen readers are JAWS, NVDA, and VoiceOver. And the most used combination is JAWS with Chrome, also NVDA with Chrome, but I would say that it is enough to test JAWS one time with Chrome browser and NVDA with Firefox, of course on a Windows operating system, and for the VoiceOver with Safari on a Mac OS system. The good thing on a Mac is that when you update your MacBook, then it has already the new VoiceOver version integrated, because versioning is also very important to think of when testing for screen reader users. So I'm always up to date with my MacBook, and I cannot assume that a user has also the same output I have, because they may be working with an older version. So let's finally answer the question what semantic HTML actually is. So yeah, it's a markup language, it's saying in the name already, and whose tags describe purpose. And combined with the user agent style sheet, it often also comes with a specific look, as we already saw in our link and button examples. You can see that there are many different tags, and I always have the feeling that I only use the same 5 tags in every project, but there are actually more than 100 different HTML tags. Crazy, right? Right? So yeah, the important part is that these elements can be divided into different sections. I divided in semantic HTML, the good ones, like the main, the nav, the header, the different heading styles, lists and stuff. It's mostly block elements. Then we have the non-semantic HTMLs, the bad ones, div and spam. So div is the really, really overused element of all time. They do not have any meaning at all. It's only for styling purposes, and that's what you should only use it for styling purposes, nothing else. Not a div with a row of button, not a div with anything else. It's just for styling, for your containers, only for this. And then we have semantic HTML, the ugly version, because this still is semantic. There's still meaning behind it, but screen readers don't care about it. And that's a problem. So we as developers, we are maybe thinking, okay, I use all this great semantic HTML, I understand the meaning, and I use them correctly, and still no screen reader output. What the fuck? But it happens, unfortunately. It's mostly with the inline elements. Yeah. It is what it is. That's why we should test thoroughly when we use it to get the output we assume we're getting when using them. And of course, you do not have to memorize all of these elements or if they work with screen readers or not. You use a Google Skills or read the blog posts by Adrian Roselli or Manuel Matuzovic, and you're good to go. They test thoroughly all these elements, also with users who are blind and using screen readers on a daily basis, and they really get into detail what is working and what not, and why. So we do not have to think too long about what the hell is going on. So let's sneak in a little to some examples where non-mouse users do not necessarily get what they have paid for in time and money. So we all know that mouse users are the ones who are getting mostly everything they want when visiting a website, but yeah, not the other ones. The first example would be the section element. Section element is used for layouts. And it's not that the section element is actually one of the ugly ones, but it's an interesting one because it has different outcomes we should think of when using it. A section is, in case you never used it, let's say you have a one-pager and navigation with 3 links, and it's the hero section, the about section, and another section, and you click on the link and it jumps to the section. That's why you use sections, different sections, and they're also, with using the H2 element, visually clear that another section starts. And the thing is that a section itself is a semantic HTML element, but using it, in my case, with VoiceOver on Safari, it does not have any semantics when using screen reader. So if you only use the section element, then we see that it is ignored by in the accessibility pane here, meaning by assistive technology. And it also has no role, even though there is a counterpart in ARIA when using the section, which would be the region. But only using the tag itself, it does not become an element with a role or an accessible element. While on the other hand, when you label it, let's say with ARIA label or ARIA labeled by, which would be the better choice because of internationalization and do not repeat yourself, and you connect it with the ID, with the heading for the next section, it suddenly becomes a role with, it becomes semantic, and it gets the role region, and that is also, it's not ignored anymore by screen reader users. And there's also a different voice screen reader output when testing with VoiceOver. Yeah, you can see it clearly that this part is the section without any ARIA labels, and that's why it's ignored. And the criteria section would be the one with the ARIA labeled, and it becomes accessible. Yeah, another good thing when using the section as a landmark, it appears in the VoiceOver rotor and becomes navigatable for screen reader users when they use their shortcuts, like the VoiceOver rotor. But now let's listen to the screen reader example.
Heading Level 1, choosing a starter Pokemon. Heading Level 2, Introduction. This document provides a guide to help with the important task of choosing your very first Pokemon. Criteria, region. Heading Level 2, criteria. There are many different criteria to be considered when choosing a Pokemon. Type, skills, power, attacks, weaknesses. You are currently on a selectable text.
Yeah, so the first section, Introduction, was simply announced with the heading and its following paragraph, while the second one was announced as criteria as the section, and then again the criteria announced as the heading, and after that the paragraph was announced. So the output is different, and it makes it different for screen reader users when you have the section as semantic HTML with the ARIA label or simply not. Other examples would be header and footer. So it seems that not everyone knows that there's a possibility that you can use the header and the footer not only as a direct child for the body, which would be the header with the navigation, the logo, and the links in the navigation or the search functionality, and the footer also with the company logo and the small links and like social media links below. But you can also use it when creating articles, for example, or cards. You can make a card appear like the card has a header and then its body text and also as a footer. And then it's not a direct child of the body element anymore, but of the card element or an article. Let's take a look at each case when the header and the footer are used as direct childs from the body element or when they are used as inner childs for children, for card elements, or an article in our case. So we have the header element as a direct child of the body, and we can see the output in our accessibility pane that it has a role of banner by default, and its parent is a document. When using it as an below an article, so as the direct child of the article element, then it is ignored by the accessibility pane, so not available for screen readers, and it's not a role of header anymore, but of the banner anymore, but just a generic element. And the same goes, of course, for the footer element as well. Using the footer as a child in the article, it has no role at all, but when it is a direct child of the body element, then it has the role of content info. In our case, to make it visually clear, this is our header as a direct child of the body. This is the header from the article. This is the footer from the article, and this is the footer from the whole page or from the body. The good thing is as well, when using the difference between the two cases we can use header and footer is that as landmarks, when it appears as banner and content information, it is also available for screen reader users when they are navigating via the voiceover rotor. And they will not get into the header or footer inside the article.
Banner, link, Hello World, heading level 1, the story behind Hello World, 08.12.2024. Hello World was the very first text ever appearing on a machine. Copyright signed 2024 the internet. Copyright signed 2025 the better debt. All rights reserved.
So at least in the voiceover Safari combination, the footer element will not be announced at all when navigating the whole site by choosing read from top to bottom. It's interesting because it was shown in the rotor, but it's not additionally announced when just navigating through the site. And it's also not, when testing with screen reader users, this does not seem to be a real problem. So they still get the information, or get that this is now a footer, and they most likely do not navigate from top to bottom until they see the footer, but they use the rotor I have shown before. So this is nothing to worry about. It's just how it is, at least with VoiceOver. So the next two elements are really many developers have problems to use correctly. The rule of thumb is links go somewhere and buttons do something. An A with a row of button is not a button. A button is a button. Also, not a div with a row of button is a button. A button is a button, just to make it clear. I created the two elements looking exactly the same and want to show the difference and why it's important to understand the differences when reading the DOM tree. Yeah, so the first one is actually a link. It has an href attribute with the hash, and I see this so often in code, and I really don't get it because the href is already the attribute to make it for the link element. So don't you think it's weird using it, writing it this way? I mean, why? Just use a button. But okay, I see this very often. And yeah, okay, there's the onClick event with the text clicked for it for green background. There is, now we go into more detail. Also important is in the accessibility pane, we have the role of link, meaning screen reader users will get the information, link, click for green background. But when I see something called click for green background, I assume something is happening and not something is navigating me somewhere else. So hearing link, click for green background does not make sense at all. And also the default styling of a link, we can see in the user agent style sheet is, for example, in a link, the cursor is the auto, which would be, I think, the pointer, which is also visually different for a user when navigating over these two elements, that why is it one time the pointer element, and for the other ones it will be the arrow. And additionally, we have for links different stylings like visited link, links which are not opened until now, and other styling opportunities when having a link, which we do not have when we're using the button. Yep. So for the button element, it is a button with the type button. This is the attribute for the button, the first one we put on when we are writing a button, and I hope you all use the type button, even so it's not that different, but you should use the type of button. We never know how it will be in the next few years. So this is already something different when creating it. We have, instead of using the href attribute, we use the type button attribute because it's a button. Also, the output for screen readers is different. We now have the role of button, and that is focusable and clickable, and these are default information. Yeah? This is the built-in information, the built-in functionality for a button, which we do not necessarily have when we use the A tag and make it as a button. And also, the button is a block element, while the link is inline, and as I mentioned, the cursor here is also different. It has default, and this will be the black arrow instead of the pointer element. When using the voice-over rotor, like for screen reader users, they also get different information, as we do when navigating visually. So the first button appears in the links panel, click for green background, and while the real button is in the form, under the form controls. Yeah, let's listen to the screen reader output.
Link, click for green background. You are currently on a link. Click for yellow background. Button. You are currently on a button.
Yeah, as already mentioned, it's weird that the screen reader user gets the information that this is a link and they should do something like click for green background, which does not make sense on a link. And also for keyboard users, a link is something they can only activate by clicking the Enter key, while operating a button is they can either use the Enter key or the spacebar to interact with it. So also this information is useful for screen reader users because they would navigate differently or use different keys when hearing that this is a link or hearing that this is a button. The next 4 elements are this combination, M, B, strong, and I. They're mostly used for visuals, especially the B and the I. So B is for bold and the I for italic. And they have 2 counterparts. For B, it will be strong, and for I, it's M for emphasis. When do we use each? Before HTML5, B and I, as I read, was even deprecated, but they got it back. And it now has a bit of semantics, but not necessarily. So you would use emphasis over the I when you would say, like, this is my dog. Do you want explicit tell the other person that this is mine, this belongs to me? That's why when you use emphasis. And you would use only the italic styling when saying, like, I'm using the programming language called R, and then you would set R into the italics font. So it's not important, but to make it at least visually clear that the language you're using is R. And for strong, it's the same. Bold you would use inside a paragraph, and you want to highlight 2 or 3 words which you want the user to notice, but it's not that important. While when using the strong element, you would use it for attention, when you're doing this and this. So for the attention word, you would use strong over bold because you want every user to get the information. But even though there is semantic meaning behind all 4 of them, it is unfortunately not screen reader readable. So it's not supported by screen readers. When looking at the don't print also the accessibility pane, we see the emphasized text using the M tag. It is ignored by screen readers, even though it has a role of emphasis. The bold text would be this sentence, is also ignored by accessibility pane and does not have a role, while its counterpart strong has now a role of strong, but is also ignored by screen readers. And for the I italic tag, it is ignored and it does not have any matching ARIA roles. In case you're thinking, okay, when it's not supported by screen readers, why even bother? We never know what happens in the future. And then you would have to rewrite your code. So it's better to still use it, hoping for the best that screen reader support will come someday, at least. Let's listen to the screen reader output. If a screen reader user would understand that something is important in all of these sentences.
This is a test sentence to show emphasized text, period. This is a test sentence to show bold text, period. This is a test sentence to show strong text, period. This is a test sentence to show cursive text, period. This is a test sentence to show text.
The last one didn't even mention that there's a period. This is how screen readers are. You cannot really rely on them. But the sentence just were read out as they are and not saying that the emphasized text is inside emphasis or something like this. I suggest still use it for future. And 2 other elements, the delete and the insert elements, I see quite often. And the screen reader support, at least for Safari and VoiceOver, is getting better. So my current version now support these 2 elements, but they didn't last summer. I can tell. So this is what I mean with we can still use it because we never know when they get supported. So for the first example, we have the word Pikachu inside a paragraph. We want to delete it because we do not want to choose Pikachu, we want to use Charmander. The second example We also use delete and insert, but this time without a paragraph. The paragraph is outside, is the parent of delete and insert. Let's listen to the examples. These are styled. I styled them using the before element to insert a minus and to insert a plus. Yeah, and this is the default styling we get when simply doing nothing, just using delete and insert. So it's strike through and underlined by default by the user agent style sheet.
Cloak Groove, I choose you, minus, and one more item, Groove, minus, Pikachu, plus, and one more item, Groove, plus, Charmander, heading level 2, example 2, deletion, Pikachu, insertion, Charmander, was so happy to hear that.
Yeah, so the differences are using the before or also using the paragraph inside the delete or insertion, we could not understand what's going on. It announced group a few times, it announced the minus and plus, but there's no meaning behind it if you don't know what is it written for. But yeah, we could see that, well, we could hear that Pikachu was deleted and Charmander was inserted, so for the screen reader user, they would understand what's happening here. A word was strike through because it's not up to date anymore, and there is a different word we're using now, and this is also the information the screen reader gets. And this is also the current version, where everything seems to work finally. These are both the default examples when I do not use CSS and implement a minus or a plus before these two elements.
Groove, I choose you, Pikachu, Groove, Pikachu, Charmander, Groove, Charmander, heading level 2, example 2, deletion, Pikachu, insertion, Charmander, was so happy to hear that. You are currently on a text element.
Yeah, so it also seems that when you use a paragraph inside the deletion as a child element, it still don't get what's going on. And it still announces lots of groups, and the best way to use it is without a paragraph or the paragraph as the parent element for delete and insertion, and then you get the output you want to hear.
I choose you, minus, and one more item, Groove, minus, Pikachu, plus, and one more item, Groove, plus, Charmander. Pikachu, Groove, Pikachu, Charmander, Groove, Charmander, was so happy to hear that.
Yeah, this is the previous version from last summer. Lots of groups, no deletion or insertion at all. It was not understandable at all, in my opinion, what's going on. But yeah, progressive enhancement did it well, updating it, at least for VoiceOver. So you still have to check if you use a Windows machine and NVDA JAWS. You cannot rely on my output here. Every screen reader output is different. And testing is very important. A few more examples I want to go over quickly. Yeah, even though let's go over them quickly. So 3 elements, the horizontal line, or in this case, horizontal rule, it is called, the break element and the abbreviation element. The interesting thing for the HR element, for the horizontal rule, I see them often when people are creating lists, or also the drop-down fields, and the insert an HR to make it visually, to divide it visually. And it would be better to use CSS for it, because for screen reader users, there's a weird output. We have a list with 3 main items, and each list has, again, 3 items. And then there are 2 horizontal rules between them. But the list itself has 3 items. And the screen reader output for this is
list 5 items. 1. Kagoro Mori. List 3 items. Level 2. White Bullet Father of Ran Mori. White Bullet Private Detective. White Bullet Sleeping Kagoro. 2. Kaido Kid.
It announced 5 items, even though there are only 3 items. And the screen reader user, of course, is looking for the other 2, which are missing. Mouse users, not so much. The break element, I see often that headings have breaks inside of it, because when the heading is very long, they want to style it differently and use a break, or they want to have it on a different line. It's nice and easy, but it destroys the screen reader output because it cuts off the sentence. And most likely you will only get the first line and you think it's over or what, and you have to go with the keyboard to navigate to the next part of the heading, which is weird. So when you're doing using it, test it first, but I would recommend to not break your heading, but use a span and style it with CSS or something. And the last element is the abbreviation element. A good example when you see what it is used for, with the title that you have abbreviation, like LOL, and it means laugh out loud. And you have the browser compatibility, like it's supported in every browser with these versions, and also the title attribute is supported, but unfortunately not for screen reader users. So it does not have, it's just read out the sentence without ever mentioning that it's called, that the title or that the abbreviation means laugh out loud. Of course, this can be different in every screen reader, and additional to the screen reader users, it's also not working for keyboard users, because a mouse user can hover over the LOL word for these dots underlined and will get the whole title, while a keyboard user will never get to it when you do not have add additional functions that it's focusable and it will pop up. So as you see, Semantic HTML comes with really cool built-in features, and you should use it even though it does not work every time. You still have to test it, but it's way better, and we hope for the best for the future, that everything will be supported as we wish. And yeah, with that, the resources are used, also my coding examples if you want to test for yourself, and I'm happy to answer any open questions you may still have. Sorry, I thought you were telling them. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, one question. You talk a lot about testing, but you also talk about there are different screen readers. It feels a bit like a minefield. And a lot of time-consuming test work, and there's also no design. So what do you test against your own idea of what you see? Because we test against very carefully created designs by UX departments with component libraries, all these things, and then you test it for a screen reader, and then as a dev, you're like, yeah, this seems about right.
Exactly.
This reader, in this browser, on this computer.
Exactly. First of all, I hope you have testers on your team who would thoroughly test it, more than a developer. And it would be best to have screen reader users, I mean blind people, on your team. Otherwise, you have to guess if you would understand it without seeing the layout before. This is the downside of everything. Yeah. Yep.
Where in text you were deleting and adding an item with Pokemon, you will hear like deleted this and added this. How do you differentiate between the text saying, for example, I deleted this, or the announcer announcing that that element is present?
I'm sorry, I do not. No worries. I mean, it said that it's deleted Pikachu and then inserted Charmander.
How does a person who's using a screen reader differentiate between if the text said that, so the text?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. I assume they are used to it and how they. I mean, when is the case where you would do it? But of course, yeah, I guess then they would not know. Otherwise, since they are not that well supported, you would write it like this. So I know examples that you have to, if you want to make it really screen reader accessible, you put in a span and then you write the text for it. So making everything with ARIA labels and many ARIA labels, so it would get the same output. Yeah.
You mentioned that there are some differences between screen readers, what are supported, what are not supported. And that reminds me about good old times with Internet Explorer, and when we were writing the hacks for it. And what are the best practices and or recipes to deal with those situations regarding screen readers and accessibility?
I mean, you should always test with all three of them to get every output. Sorry, was this your question? Yes.
So you just should test your application within all screen readers
Yeah.
which you are supporting.
Yes. No, you should test the most used combinations, which would be JAWS on Chrome and NVDA on Firefox and VoiceOver with the macOS system. And then, of course, there are so many versions, you can't test everything. And you, nowadays, also, there would be different testing using, of course, the mobile phone or an iPad, because this is a different screen reader, different VoiceOver on my iPad than on my MacBook and also on mobile phone. You can go crazy with it, but just to make sure that, for the desktop version, test at least these three combinations to be on a safer side. I'm good. Yeah. Do I have to say something?
No.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
I do the intro, that's all I'm
So, okay, yeah. Then thank you.